Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Today is May the 6th, 2017. It's the day of the Canelo Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight. Before we get to that fight, let's briefly touch on a fight on the undercard you need to know about. Reyes went the distance against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Went the distance in 2015. I have a video of one of his better wins against Porky Medina here in my favorites folder. I want you to take a look at that video. Medina is a front foot heavy fighter just like David Lemieux. Medina, of course, fought James DeGale at 168 pounds, the super middleweight champ, and gave DeGale all he could handle. Quite frankly, it was one of DeGale's worst fights. Understand, Reyes beat Medina. But after looking at film, I do like David Lemieux in this fight. Lemieux is a different talent level. Now, what I've done in my favorites folder here is I've posted a great video. David Lemieux highlights, I believe it's 2016. Now, in that video, you're going to see two David Lemieux. You're going to see the one who lost to the best. That's what I'll call him. Gennady Golovkin is the best at 160 pounds. Period. I understand the Danny Jacobs crowd has a different opinion. Fine. This is what the sport's about, all of our different opinions. In my opinion, Golovkin is one of the all-time greats in that esteemed division's history. And you're going to see him blow out David Lemieux. You're going to see David Lemieux on his back foot. Now, on his back foot, with a guy with power, hunting him down. David Lemieux is extremely limited. I just don't believe Reyes has that kind of foot speed and game to get Lemieux on his back foot. If you're a boxing handicapper and you want to know how to beat Lemieux, that Golovkin tape is the blueprint. You need to blow him out of the pocket, then you need to keep him at arm's length, and you need to batter him. But as the video continues, you're going to see why Lemieux is so good. You're going to see Lemieux on his front foot at the top of his game. And quite frankly, on his front foot, this guy is an explosive puncher. In fact, I'll go further. On his front foot, David Lemieux is Mike Tyson. Understand, the two men have a lot in common because Tyson on his back foot wasn't that good. Look at Tyson's first fight against Evander Holyfield. But Tyson on his front foot looked like a world beater. I just get the feeling that Lemieux is going to be on his front foot. He's a much more explosive puncher and much better mover in the ring than Porky Medina. I'm expecting Lemieux, the favorite, to beat Reyes on the undercard. Now let's talk about the Canelo Chavez Jr. fight. Let me say this. I've posted the video of the weigh-in in my favorites folder here. You need to take a look at it. That weigh-in, Chavez Jr. looks even worse than I expected. And folks, before I saw the weigh-in, as a pre-fight video attests here online, I thought Chavez Jr. was going to lose the fight as it is. Then I see him at the weigh-in and he looks like a guy who has just left a starvation camp. Now, I understand he's working behind the scenes with Memo Heredia, the nutritional expert who helped Juan Manuel Marquez before his fourth fight against Manny Pacquiao. This is the same guy who helped Lucien Boutte in his fight against James DeGale, and quite frankly, Boutte in the second half of that fight looked good. He looked better than he did in the first half. Boutte is an older fighter, and that was the best conditioned Boutte I had seen in quite some time. So I have no doubt that Memo Heredia, will be able to help rehydrate Chavez Jr. somewhat. but there's just too much work to do. I'm expecting Chavez Jr. to get stopped. What I want you to do, looking at the weigh-in, knowing that Canelo is a hellacious body puncher. Hellacious, right? Just look at the fight he had against Liam Smith. Just look at the midsection. Just look at it. Of Chavez Jr. Folks, it's about as bad as it could look at a weigh-in. It looks to me like they just pumped out everything out of his intestines. Right? It looks to me like he hasn't had a glass of water for several days. Right? If you go back in boxing history, you're going to find out that a lot of the fighters who ended up getting badly hurt in the ring, Gerald McClellan, for example, had weight problems and lost weight to make weight. Right? Many of the guys who got badly hurt, I mean their careers ended, in some case fatalities happened, are guys who lost a lot of weight before a fight. Right? That's gravity. Now, Chavez Jr. is trying, with Memo Heredia, are trying to fight gravity. We're supposed to buy into this idea that modern nutrition, against one of the hardest punchers in the sport, is somehow going to allow Chavez Jr., who fought his prior fight at 168, to somehow gain weight and strength and be able to deal with Canelo's body punches. Right? Come on. It's not going to happen. I like Canelo big in this fight. Another thing to look at the weigh-in is look at Chavez Jr.'s neck and chin. Folks, it doesn't even look like Chavez Jr. That's how much weight he's lost around here. That's how fluid deprived the guy is. Another thing to look at the weigh-in is Canelo. Now, we're supposed to believe that Canelo is really a 154-pound guy who's now gaining weight to fight at 164 and stuff like that. Canelo's the bigger man in this fight. Look at the guy's necks. Look at Canelo's chin, his jawline, and compare it to Chavez Jr.'s jawline. There's no fat on Canelo at 164. Right? Quite frankly, he looks so well put together at the weigh-in, I'm wondering how the guy could go down to 160 to fight Golovkin when he wins this fight. Let me be more charitable, if he wins this fight, right? But I'm expecting Canelo to win big. Right? Understand, Canelo doesn't have to spend a lot of time rehydrating after this weigh-in. He's in great shape. Now let's talk boxing styles. Let me say this, right? Chavez Jr. unfortunately has many of the same bad habits that Nathan Cleverly has. But Nathan Cleverly is a great athlete. Chavez Jr. is not. So Chavez Jr. leans over. When he comes inside, he thinks he's his father, right? So he leans over, only his head's not on a swivel. Now, we just saw a fight, Joshua Klitschko, where Anthony Joshua delivers the uppercut to end all uppercuts. Turns that fight. Right? Klitschko hits the ground twice in that round after the uppercut. That fight's over. Someone's going to have to explain to me how Canelo, who throws a great uppercut, how Canelo could possibly miss Chavez Jr.'s chin the way Chavez Jr. fights. I'm just telling you, Canelo's only lost once. It was to Floyd Mayweather. Great athlete, great jab, a guy who could move. Right? You want to beat Canelo with athleticism and movement. Right? Distance. Now, all I'm saying to you is there anyone watching this video, and I don't care that Chavez Jr. is training with Nacho Beristain. Is there anyone watching this video who really thinks that Chavez Jr. has the discipline to actually stay outside and move on Canelo? No. I think Chavez Jr., the taller man, right? Not the bigger man, right? When we say bigger, I'm talking about chest, shoulders, muscles, right? Canelo's the bigger man. Chavez Jr. is the taller man. That comes through when you look at the guys at the weigh-in. I think Chavez Jr. believes, since he walks around heavier, that he's going to come in and bully Canelo, right? I think there's going to be a war here over who has control in the pocket, right? I think Canelo hits harder than Chavez Jr. I think Canelo has more meat on the bone. In other words, if Chavez Jr., who does throw a great left to the body, if Chavez Jr. hits him in the body, I think Canelo has more meat on the bone to take the punch than Chavez Jr. does, right? Since he had to slim down to 164 for this fight. By the way, Memo Heredia and Chavez Jr. worked together before Chavez Jr.'s last fight. For those of you thinking Chavez Jr. has the bigger punch, understand his last fight went the distance against a guy with a less than 40% KO ratio. That's while he's working with Memo Heredia. That's 4 pounds higher. Right now, I don't know why guys in their 30s, and Chris Bird, I'm talking to you, think they can lose weight, drop down in weight, and somehow maintain their former punching power. I don't think Chavez Jr. is even going to have the punching power that he had at 168. Right? And that's with Memo Heredia. Let me also say this too, and I want you to Google this. Many of you are watching this on a device that's attached to the internet. Okay, great, right? You have access to internet service. I want you to Google this. Chavez Jr.'s father, in an interview, said that his son was bipolar. Right? You need to think hard about that. Now, I personally believe that some of the best athletes I've seen in my life were bipolar. Right? Being bipolar could actually give you an advantage if you're manic during an athletic event, right? And you just believe in yourself in that moment, right? As much as you can. You just have as much energy as you can. I can tell you, I once went to a gym with a bipolar person. And she, not a person who worked out regularly or anything like that. She was on the treadmill going full tilt for something like half an hour. And this was a woman who didn't really hit the gym. She was just up that day. One of the reasons we went to the gym was I noticed she was up that day. So I thought, man, how do I mellow a homegirl out? I decided to go to the gym, and at the gym, she absolutely tore it up. Right? Bipolar people can be on during an athletic event and really perform well. But what you need to understand is the heavy discipline that boxing requires, right? The heavy discipline, the clear head that boxing requires when things get heavy and you need to think, right? Someone who is suffering from mania or depression in a moment of time might not have that clear level of thinking, or might be too down, right, to continue. So, Chavez Jr., who is prone to mood swings according to his father, right, quits on the stool against Andres Fonfara, doesn't he? quits on the stool. Felt that he couldn't continue. Right? What happens in this fight? Emotionally charged. Right? This is really for, the championship of the Mexican population's imagination as it comes to boxing. Both of these guys are very popular in Mexico. Huge fight, right? Julio Cesar Chavez is a boxing legend internationally. His son, a former champion, is remembered in Mexico big time. Right? Now, what happens if the guys enter the ring and Chavez Jr. is completely feeling the adrenaline? Right? He's ready to make history. Canelo couldn't be that good. Canelo's the shorter man than him. Right? What's Canelo doing fighting a guy like him who has fought at, the 170s? Then what happens if the fight starts? He tries to bum rush Canelo. By the way, that usually these days is a very bad idea. Just ask James Kirkland. Let's say that Chavez Jr. decides, look, forget what Nacho's telling me. Right? I'm going to prove to the world here that I'm the stronger man. That I'm the guy who can dictate what's happening in this fight. That I own the pocket. That this small guy has no business being in the ring with me. Right? Chavez Jr. in interviews has said he feels Canelo is jealous of him. Think about that. Right? He's that emotionally involved in the thinking of this fight. Now, what happens if Chavez Jr. comes out, goes up against Canelo, gets hit with some of the hardest punches in boxing? Understand, this card is three of the guys who I consider to be three of the hardest punchers in the sport. Right? Lemieux's on this card. Lucas Matisse's on this card, folks. In addition to Canelo. And I've always thought that Canelo's real calling card is his punching power. Right? Canelo is on the very short list of the hardest punchers in the sport. What happens if Chavez Jr. gets discouraged after he feels Canelo's power? What happens if he has mood swings during this match? Right? Keep in mind, his body's already under a lot of stress. You know that just looking at the weigh-in. Right? He doesn't even look like himself. You're looking at his abs, and I'm telling you, he looks like he's straight out of a starvation camp. Right? He looks like, they somehow drained his intestines. So he's now going to rehydrate, and guess what? He's going to be in the ring against one of the sport's hardest punchers. And, of course, his style. It won't be natural for him. Right? Because he's in with a new trainer. And they're working on new things. So he doesn't even have the comfort of having a style that's familiar to him. Right? Mike Tyson put it best. He said, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. I'm expecting Canelo to hit Chavez Jr. in the mouth. I'm expecting the Nacho Beristain game plan to fly out the window. I'm expecting this to become a war of attrition. And I'm expecting the harder puncher, and that's Canelo, to rule the roost. Right? I wouldn't even be surprised if Chavez Jr. decides, you know what? I've made a lot of money here. Right? What am I doing fighting down at 164 anyway? It's because I believe the guy knows he can't compete at 168. He's been undressed by Andres Fonfara. Or at 175. Isn't that Kovalev, Andre Ward, Adonis Stevenson? Right? So I wouldn't be surprised if Chavez Jr. quits again. That's if he's allowed to quit. Because Canelo might just stop him in the ring and not even allow him to get back to his corner to quit if Canelo hurts him in the middle of a round. Right? Canelo is a murderous puncher, folks. Here, if he fights slow, if he gets slow against the taller guys, so he gets even lower, then, you know, Chavez Jr. is able to dole out power shots on. If he blocks Chavez Jr.'s left to the body, and if he just decides, I'm going to take out this guy's rib cage, then I'm going to mix it up with uppercuts, I think Canelo wins this fight easily. I like Canelo in the fight. As I said, Chavez Jr.'s only chance is a KO in the first 4 rounds. After that, forget it. I'm crossing his name off the list. I'm expecting him to be another Canelo victim. As I've said, to get a gauge on how hard Canelo hits, look at the guy on the canvas, Liam Smith, at the end of Canelo's recent knockout, right? That guy's in pain and on the canvas off body shots. Now, if you see that fighter in his other fights, he's a tough guy. He's a guy who shows no emotion when he's hit with big punches. Against Canelo, that normally stoic fighter looks like he's broken a rib. Right? Let's talk about left hooks, the best left hooks in boxing. Go back to Canelo against Carlos Baldomir. I'm telling you, Canelo hits Baldomir with a left hook, and Baldomir is unconscious while he's standing up. Right? It's like a tree falling in the forest. He's unconscious before he hits the canvas. Right? Canelo's power is underrated. Quite frankly, Canelo shouldn't even be fighting at middleweight. He should be fighting at super middleweight. This fight is tailor-made for him. He's against a guy who insists on leaning forward, right? His chin's exposed. He's hyper-aggressive. He's faded so much that Chavez Jr. didn't get the knockout in his last fight. Right? That's how much he's faded. Right? I like Canelo here. I'm expecting him to leave no doubt. Right? I like Canelo here. I'm expecting a stoppage. You know, but let's just say if it goes the distance, I'm expecting it to be lopsided. I'm not expecting drama when it comes to the reading of the scorecards. Right? I think Chavez Jr. made a big mistake taking this fight. Now, there are some. Golovkin's trainer, right, Abel Sanchez, who believes that Chavez, right, is going to scare Canelo early. That might happen. Right? As I said, the first 4 rounds are going to be interesting. After that, I don't think the fight's going to be interesting. I think this is going to be Canelo from round 5 on. Anyway, that's how I see it, and I, of course, wouldn't be surprised if Canelo just blows him off the map in round 1, right? Because Canelo, I know Canelo at times is a bit of a slow starter. I get that. But let's just say when you run at Canelo, you're asking for trouble. That James Kirkland fight was over before it was over. In fact, in that fight, when the ref stops the fight, I was grateful because I thought Kirkland was at risk of being killed. That's how heavy Canelo hits, right? I get the feeling that Chavez Jr., whatever he's told his corner, is going to try to bum rush Canelo. That's the worst thing a fighter can do. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.